Are there certain features of properties, or maybe it's certain locations or a listing description? I know you talked about, the natural light, but is there anything that you see these properties always perform better, like certain ones are going to get booked up when you're curating?
That's a really good question. Never underestimate the importance of brand and copywriting. And what I mean there is your headline. I know that there's been a lot of complaining because Airbnb's latest search changes remove headlines from a lot of listings. And depending on how you choose to search, but the headline still, once somebody is on your is viewing your home, a catchy headline, not just a descriptor. Like I see a lot of folks default to 3 beds, pool, and golf course, and that's the title of the actual listing. And again, maybe historically because of search, that made a little bit more sense. Now with how Airbnb is choosing to categorize these homes, I think that you should view your individual listing as it's really sort of an opportunity to showcase your brand, right? So having a cool name, right? Saying something that evokes emotion and excitement about staying in your place with the headline. That's awesome. That would always catch our eye. For example, there was this great place that we stayed in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine, and it was called the Sparrow's Nest, right? And the Sparrow's Nest immediately sort of evokes these connotations of cozy, neat, it's probably small, right? And it was this beautiful, small, French cottage that we've actually gone back to twice. We're going back a third time this fall because we've just fallen in love with this place. Susie, who's the hostess there, is just unbelievable. So focusing on that headline, while headlines might have been crucial for search previously, they're now crucial to convince somebody to make a purchase, right? So it's less of a marketing play and more of a sales play, I would say. The other thing is in the actual copy description, obviously note bedrooms, all the basics, all the amenities, but also use it as an opportunity to tell a story, right? I distinctly remember reading some copy on some of these listings and feeling whoa, I was understanding again, the character, the brand behind this space and what that tells you as a prospective guest, especially if you're hoping to target what I would call a more professional traveler, somebody who travels a lot and they actually read descriptions for these, places, and they're not just booking based off of photos. It gives you the opportunity to, if you take the time to write something different, immediately what that communicates is, oh, okay, this looks different. It feels different. It smells different. It probably is different, right? These people probably know what they're doing.
It's not like a finding a way from a big, manager. Yeah,
exactly. So finding a way to tell a story with your listing, describing the feeling that I am going to have, right? Do that first, and then talk to me about the fact that we've got an espresso and, we've got a Peloton that you could use to whatever. Those things are cool. They're great. I don't think you need to lead with that, especially with how search has changed. Lead with the storytelling, lead with the, emotional appeal, and then close the deal with those additional amenities.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It reminds me that I need to go back and do that a little bit more on my listings as well. Cause I think we are a little too, literal in our listings. I think that emotion and experience, that's what you're rewarded for providing on Airbnb. So that's awesome. In terms of, so you have the podcast Behind the Stays where you're interviewing all these different types of hosts who got into Airbnb, which is really a cool idea because the more people I talk to, it's so unique, the different stories of how they got into it and what their first one was like. And then some of them, how they scaled over time. What, I guess, are there, when you thinking about the host now, not necessarily the property itself.
Yeah.
Are there certain characteristics of hosts that you've noticed that have contributed to them being more successful than those who aren't quite doing so well?
Yes, that is a great question. So I actually did an interview very recently, I think it published last week or the week before, with this guy called Isaac French. He's a young dude. He's 25, 26 years old. And he built this really cool collection of cabins out in Waco, Texas. So in Waco, Texas, and Texas is, not the most beautiful of states. No offense to anyone who might be from Texas. It's not colorful, right? It's got a lot of beauty in its people and its character, but like not tons of natural beauty, right? Well, Isaac found this plot of land, 5 acres, and there was a little like pond in the middle, totally overgrown, but he bought the land. He expanded the pond. He calls it like a lake. It's really like a slightly oversized pond. But and then he put up these 7 really beautiful cabins around the lake. And he calls it Live Oak Lake. Live Oak Lake is the property. And what he was so compelling, because again, he's a young guy. He's he's built this from the ground up. He actually acted as like the general contractor because it was COVID and it was hard to find general contractors. So like he's a self-taught like hustler, really. Yeah. But what struck me about Isaac, he said, in any sort of market, there comes a point in the maturity of that market where you really have to it's not enough to just be associated to be a player in the market. Like you have to stand out. Like you have to be known, right? And what he was getting at was like a lot of people, Airbnbs or short-term rentals in general are at a phase right now where it's like you go talk to 10 people in your circle, chances are one of them has like a short-term rental and or is like thinking about getting one, right? Like especially over the last couple of years, it's just exploded, right? Mm-hmm. Now Airbnb says, they need way more hosts and there's not enough, supply for the demand and all that stuff. But what he said, which really stuck with me, is like, we're at a point in the short-term rental market where differentiation has never been more important. There's a robust opportunity. Like the number of Airbnbs, the number of short-term rentals available is increasing literally by the day. And if you want to do something special and unique, it's worth actually taking the time to figure out like what that thing is for you and what you think Kirby is unique and significant to you versus what I think could be totally different. And that's okay. But too many people get disappointed in this space or feel like upset when they launch something, but it looks like everything else, or, it's using the same, like the number of places we went to that had the same like photo or like this print of like a steed, right? Like with like, you've probably seen it at Target. It's everywhere. It's like these small things. If you want to stand out, like you can't do what everyone else is doing. So anyways, what Isaac said is like, I knew that I needed to make this perfect and I needed to spend the money that it took to make this absolutely perfect for me. Because if it was perfect to my standard, other people would find it great. And the bigger point that he was making too is too often we see this opportunity, investors see these opportunities as like kind of like quick wins, right? Or like a relatively quick way to increase cash flow. And they certainly can be, but we're at a season in this market where if you want something meaningful, it's probably worth doing the work and waiting until you actually can deliver a quality experience that is unique. And so that's maybe a little bit of a caveat, to your initial question. But I really do think for folks who are in the space and looking to go from 1 to 2 or 2 to 5 or whatever level up, like at some point you have to either be after the quantity game or the quality game. I think it's hard to probably do both well unless you have, tons of capital. I think that there is a dearth of quality, very intentional, well thought out spaces. And that's where I would encourage most people to focus. And being different doesn't have to mean spending more money. Like it often means that, but it doesn't have to only mean that. And what I mean by that is like, we stayed at this really interesting, like the most like memorable place because it was so unique in San Diego, California. Okay. This guy was an artist, and the entire, like, you walk into, it's a relatively small house, a 2-bedroom house. You walk into this 2-bedroom home and there are just house plants everywhere, right? Everywhere. But the way that he put these plants out, the pots that he used, right? Like the planters were all distinct and all different and all unique. And then he used his own artwork for the walls. He had like a themed bathroom that was like a speakeasy themed bathroom. And then another bathroom that was like rainforest themed. And I was talking with him, and he did not spend that much money doing this. He just approached his place with like extreme intentionality. And therefore it photographed well. People love it because it's weird. It's quite frankly really weird, and weird things get, Instagrammed. So it was very Instagrammable. And then before you know it, like he's doing really well. He's booked out like 4 months in advance, and again, he didn't have a ton of money to spend. And so I think really focusing on what different means to you in your context, by your location, with your resources, really drilling into that is my strongest recommendation.